with the echo this time. But we wanted to talk a little bit about motivation with the buyers and sellers in commercial, and then also touch a little bit on the difference with working like with a retail lease versus a purchase of a building, kind of the due diligence that goes into that stuff. So, one thing that we notice a lot, the difference between residential and commercial is motivation for the buyers or the tenants, any of those types of things. And it changes based off of if they're users, if they're going to be the tenants in the building, if they're investors, if they're trading into it. It changes quite a bit. And so I think the motivation that we find, the difference on the residential side is you have these people that either need to move because of a job, they need to move because they need to upsize or downsize, and there's more of a driving factor on why that they're going to move in from one house to another. Where we find commercial wise is motivation even for the users. There's not necessarily a motivation on a specific place. There's not a motivation on a specific type of building or anything like that. Their motivation is more what fits perfectly into their business, and if they find it, all right, we'll move forward. But even when we go into contract, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a guarantee sale or a guarantee lease on it, because something pops up with the building and they've got to make changes. They've got to think about it financially on the business side of it. It's less to do with the heart and more to do with the financial side of it and the business side of it.
In terms of the motivations, as Brett said, there's usually a lack of need, especially on the investor's perspective. The one thing that I think agents that we talk to at RE/MAX, everyone gets excited because and it's fine. It's good to get excited if an investor comes in and says, "Hey, I want to buy, an office building." Well, I think last time we talked about qualifying, but again, that buyer, anyone can say that they want to get into commercial real estate or I want to buy this, buy that. There's a big process involved in terms of the motivation of that investor is they're just looking for an alternative investment. Not as motivated as that, that.
Hey Jim, you're cutting in and out. I don't know what's going on.
Okay. The buyer, the buyer of a residential may like a neighborhood, they may like a school district, etc. When we're dealing with a couple of corporate clients, we have a couple of corporate clients that we do site selection for, and as we're doing that, it's general areas, and it's areas just that are identified by maybe work patterns for the individuals, where they need to be located, near shopping. There's a whole different array of questions that we would ask than you would residentially, where many times your client may have already selected that neighborhood. Ours is a little different, and we really have to ask lots of questions, which we did in terms of the qualifying, as we talked about last week. So motivations are a little different in our industry, and relative to that investor group, of which everyone's trying to come into Phoenix, in terms of maybe buying an apartment building, maybe buying an office building, but there's still parameters and there's still those questions that we have to ask that we talked about last week to get down to their motivations. One of the items I know Jen brought in, we're talking about the pot industry right now, and she gave us a lead. We met with the person, but we probably had 4 different individuals within the last 2 weeks wanting to find different places to operate either a retail or a growing area, a grow component, whether they're inside of Maricopa County or outside. But it's exciting because those groups actually overpay for real estate. Because remember that that industry is still state regulated, not federally regulated. Well, it's federally regulated, so they can't really use the banking system as much. So you'll see a lot more cash and people overpaying for projects in that industry at this point. But again, motivations a little different, some similarities, but just be patient on how when you're dealing in that commercial arena for that.
Yeah, even the motivation for like he's talking about the Prop 207 that passed, and a lot of marijuana industry type people that want to get investment into it are starting to move out here to Arizona or get ready for a lottery that's coming up. Even motivation wise, is there's a lot of energy and motivation to start and get into the process, but then because commercial tends to be a lot longer of a process, the excitement and the motivation kind of start to die down a little bit because you have to wait on a lot of different things. There's a lot of different moving pieces. So even the motivation on somebody like that. So what we try to do then is really get an understanding of either the particular person or the investment group on what their timing is and where they sit financially. No different than residential. Making sure that they're coming in either pre-qualified or they've got the cash in hand ready to go, because that's the other thing. It still is a tight market in the commercial side, and so we don't want to go into the market, look for buildings or look for spaces, find it, and then not be ready financially, and then all of a sudden that motivation or that energy that's moving forward in the deal kind of dies down and kills it. So even motivation-wise, we try to temper it a little bit and make sure, all right, do you have A, B, and C already lined up? Because really for us, before we look at a building or a space, we are, a couple of steps down the road. We need to make sure that they've got the other stuff lined up as well.
Any questions on that? One of the things that we do want to bring up is COVID. COVID's come up in our industry as well as your industry, I'm sure. But in our industry, people have a tendency to believe COVID affected the commercial market in a bad way if you're an owner, in a good way if you're a potential buyer. And the problem is it hasn't. It hasn't affected our industry at all. The apartment sector continues to do quite well. The retail sector, while a lot of restaurants are going out of business, they're getting backfilled, and owners have not dropped their rates, and vacancy rates are not this is not 2009, 2010, a lot of money on the sidelines, wanting to wait for that one deal because there are bargains out there. There aren't any bargains. Industrial vacancy rate is 7% to 8% around the valley, which is really very, it's very low for our industry. And again, hard to find deals. The office sector is the one part that people have a tendency to believe, because we had that WeWork concept I like to talk about at 80 square feet per person. That concept is dead, but there'll be a rearranging of spaces in terms of, there might be that corner office again, the bigger corner office. So really, it hasn't affected that industry just yet. There hasn't been an overbuilding like there was in 2006, 2007 from the commercial sector, like there was in the residential when there was 65,000 permits being pulled in Maricopa County back in 2007. So COVID has not affected us. So when we're in the market looking for a property, a project, etc., we have to understand that we just lost a deal yesterday. We were on $1 million deal. We lost it $10,000, and it kind of hurts when in our industry. So we have to. People are having to overpay for projects right now, even in our industry.
Yeah, it's very, very similar to the residential wise is even specifically, we had an industrial buyer. Thankfully we won out on it, but the industrial building, 6,000 square feet, went on the market on a Monday. We put an offer in on Friday, and we were one of 4 offers already by the time we put it in on Friday, which is basically like putting it in the same day for us, and it's very rare. So it's just things are moving quick. Sellers and landlords are not recognizing losses, yet buyers and tenants are thinking that there's great deals out there. So it's kind of this trying to educate our buyers.
We have a big gap. We have a big gap. Buyers are still thinking that there are deals, and sellers are holding on their prices. So, any questions? No. Greg, was that a nod or was that a shake?
The other thing we want to kind of go into, and please, if there's questions, even if it's not about what we're talking about, please ask. We can kind of go offside a little bit. But the other thing we wanted to talk about was kind of the differences in our due diligence from a lease side of things to a purchase side, and understanding kind of timing that goes into it, and the whole team that goes into specifically a purchase. And so for us, a lease, if we take a retail lease, just at a shopping center, say it's a shopping center at Desert Ridge, Mesa Ridge, Vestar?
That's Vestar.
Vestar. So Vestar owns Desert Ridge. So we go into Desert Ridge. Doesn't matter if we have a big space or a small space. We work out we pass back and forth LOIs. We work out the kind of the meat and potatoes of what's going to be in the lease. Once we agree to that, Vestar and a lot of these other big shopping centers have a lease that is upwards of 50 to 60 pages long.
Before we go into that, does everyone know what a letter of intent is? How we do things like that? Does everyone know? Yay, nay? Okay.
Can you say that one more time? You kind of cut out a bit.
Letter of intent. What we do in our industry, whether it's purchase or a lease, a letter of intent is people don't. Do you want me to just talk about that? It's what we do is we, instead of putting in residential, you'll put a contract in. The seller will review it. We put a letter of intent in, which is basically a 1 to 2 page document that outlines all the business terms of the deal. No legalese. It's non-binding, and that's how the seller or the owner will make a decision based upon for either our tenant or for our purchaser. So the letter of intent is used by a purchase or a lease for a tenant. After that, we negotiate business terms. Once the business terms are negotiated, that's when we go in. That's when we utilize. Typically, we utilize attorneys. We don't negotiate the documents. Most of the time, if you're dealing with a larger brokerage firm, you will not see the state form or the form that's put out by the Association of Realtors. You will see an attorney involved. Thus, your client will have to have an attorney as well. The attorney will take that letter of intent and adapt, whether it's a lease or a purchase, will adapt that letter of intent into a legal document. We'll talk to the buyer, the seller, whoever you represent, and then that's where that contract. Again, when we talk about the letter of intent, it's non-binding, but there's a quid pro quo that we're taking it off the market to negotiate for the contract. I think Brett's pulling up a letter of intent right now.
Let me make sure that you're able to do that.
Let me see if I can share.
All right, so this is a typical letter of intent. This was for a lease situation.
All right, you should be able to share it now.
This is a woman that we represented. She has a company called Hammer and Stein. which is a woodworking kind of fun place at night, one of those painting places. We worked with her. She was in a space off of 19th Avenue and Thomas. It was terrible. We had to sit down with her, talk with her about where she wanted to go. Brett did a good job of, after we asked the 20 or 30 questions, sitting down, we found a couple different spaces. We toured, kind of like what you do as well. But then when we found the space that we did like, we put together a letter of intent. So this letter of intent is to a woman named Christina Ramon, who is the broker at, I think she's at Cushman Wakefield, Newmark.
Addison Young.
Addison Young, who represents the current landlord. We put together this letter of intent to lease, which is Hammerstein, tenant, premises, location, the use, what it's going to be. Use becomes really good because, interesting, because we have to, many times we have to specify what the use is. In many shopping centers, in this case, if there was another woodworking place, they may have a non-compete clause within that shopping center, which, you know, if they had another one, we couldn't have it. If we were representing a restaurant, a Mexican restaurant, let's just say, and there was another Mexican restaurant, they don't want that cannibalization in that shopping center. So found this space, 1,000 square feet, 39-month lease. And the reason why it's a 39-month lease is you'll see leases 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 7 years, what have you. But we received 3 months worth of free rent on this.
So then they like to put it onto the back end of the lease.
Right. So they extended the lease term, and then we have something called CAMS. Is everyone familiar with CAMS? Common area maintenance. So this lease is a net lease. So I think last time we talked about a gross lease being one payment that a tenant makes. And let's call this a net lease where a tenant will make a payment for the rent and then also make a payment towards common area maintenance, which is for the landscaping, for the paving, for the lighting,
electricity of the lighting, signage, stuff, just anything that the landlord wants to put in there, basically.
Correct. And then we have we then, in this letter of intent, I don't know if we put it in here, but we have you know, one thing you have to be concerned about in many of the leases that we do is who takes care of the maintenance of the HVAC unit and the roof. Those are the two biggest items in any of our deals that we work on, is roof and the AC units.
Evaporate. Yeah.
An HVAC unit can cost anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000, and during your lease, if it goes out and you're stuck paying for it, it's not a really good situation. Sometimes landlords will sneak in that you pay for a portion of the lease, a portion of the roof, if there's an issue. So we have to be cognizant, which is why attorneys get involved. What's the next step? What do we got next?
So down below just talks about, you know, there was a couple of various things that we added in the letter of intent. She wanted, it was previously a sewing shop, so they had, and it was in there for 20 years. So they had some stuff they had to update. So we just want to make sure that we get it in writing. We put down, you know, specific color for what they're doing on the walls. You know, any sort of other stuff that we wanted to add, that we wanted the landlord to do. A lot of landlords will leave a space kind of not as nice necessarily because they don't want to put the money into it prior to knowing who's going to be in the space. They'd rather add it in afterwards. So this is really just kind of some lipstick stuff in there, you know, baseboards, color, stuff like that. So we added that in there. Inspection, you know, we can choose to, depending on it, have a contractor go through and make sure AC is working and all that. But in the lease, it talks about that it'll be a good working HVAC unit, a good roof at the time of moving. And then they've got to either once or twice a year, depending on what the lease states, have a maintenance person come out and maintenance the units during the lease.
And then the next one, the most important, of course, that we like, is the agency relationship, which is our commission.
Yeah.
In commissions on a lease are usually based upon, this one is on a square footage. So we got paid for all the work, we got paid a total of $3 grand.
$3,000.
Just understand that our industry is you gotta do volume in our industry, especially when you're doing small leases, which is why it's easier for us to do small leases, because most of the bigger shops don't want to do it. The other way to do it is that we would get paid on a percentage of the total value of the lease. If, for example, this lease was at $10 a square foot for 1,000 square, $10 a square foot for 1,000 square feet, that's $10,000 a year. Times 5, that's $50,000 that tenant pays over a 5-year period. We would multiply that by maybe 4% or 5%, depending on what we would negotiate. In this case, $3 a square foot was probably good, because we probably would have asked for 5% on this, so they nicked us on this. So we no disrespect, but we don't have any collusion. Everyone's kicking our butt on fees. So
Yeah, we try to get a little creative on some of this, but the important part is if you ever work a commercial deal, or when we're working commercial deals, this is a big part of our phone call prior to submitting this. This is how we make sure that we get paid. Otherwise, there's no automatic co-broke for us. There's nothing in the MLS. If we don't negotiate this prior, they can mix us out of it completely, or they can give us whatever they want. So this is a way that we kind of get a little bit creative. Square footage here was actually a little bit more than they wanted to pay us.
correct.
And when we work with these small tenants, it's more of what's a nice way to say it, more of a feel-good type situation. We don't make our money on these types of things. We try to help out other small businesses and do this. We make our money on, our listings and stuff like that, but the listings that we do and the bigger deals allow us to work and help with these smaller tenants and these smaller
Hopefully
businesses.
hopefully she gets bigger and she has another.
Yeah,
Like one of our deals that we just put into Scottsdale Fashion Square, Chicati Fashion, we'll probably end up trying to negotiate with them to put them into Kierland. Right now they're in Scottsdale Fashion Square. Macerich is the owner of that. Macerich is the owner of, which is a REIT out of LA. They're the owner of Kierland, and they would like to see Chicati there. I'm sure we'll end up beginning negotiations here soon. So
that's
anyway,
our hope.
any questions on that?
Hey, I know we're kind of going down, but will you explain the difference on the inspection? Because there is quite a bit of differences compared to residential and commercial.
So this is a lease. For our inspection, really, it's we make sure that certain things are put in there that they guarantee in the lease that the HVAC and stuff is, and we go through there. We make sure. Basically, you're just making sure everything looks good, it looks right. But once the lease starts, you take over stuff. But you got to make sure that we're going into a good space. There's more on the lease side of it. There's more to do with when it's a big lease, more to do with the attorney reviewing the lease, making sure that there's nothing where they can push you out, make you change spaces, anything like that. We want to make sure that that's protected. The bigger difference is when we purchase. We're currently doing an industrial building. We're in escrow right now with it. The due diligence and the team that comes up with the due diligence is much bigger. So first off, we're doing an SBA loan, which is similar to like a residential VA loan in the sense of there's a few more factors that go into it, and you have to make sure stuff is going right with it. So our due diligence team-wise is we have an inspector going through the building, very similar to a residential. He's going to go through and make sure everything's different, or make sure everything works, give a write-up, all that type of stuff. A big difference is this inspection takes 6.5 hours, costs roughly just under $1,000. And so preparing the buyer that, there's a lot of costs that go into just the due diligence part. So we have the inspector. we have a Alta survey go through. The survey talks about if there's any easements on it, it maps out exactly what you're buying and shows an overall map of basically elevations and
when you go through an Alta survey, the Alta survey will be, it's different than a survey. The Alta survey is required by the lender typically, and as Beth said, there's easements, it shows encroachments. It's basically a review of the title that goes on to the survey. Then the attorney can go through the title survey, and we can have, because most everything has a title review period. That's important. The lender, when the Alta survey gets done, if there's a lender involved, the lender is usually added as a group that it's certified to. So these Alta certified maps are certified to the lender, because if the lender is a lender and the lender ends up foreclosing, the lender gets the survey as well, and you know, it makes title easier to get from someone. So and as Brett's saying, the inspection can be $75 to $1,000, but there are groups that do larger deals. They'll probably do a different type of survey, which will go, I'm sorry, physical inspection, which will go through more of the history of the property and a lot more detail. And it will also talk about deferred maintenance, a deferred maintenance plan for various things. And that's going to be about $2,200 to $2,500.
So there are two different types of inspections. One, the one that we have up there that we're doing, smaller building, the buyer really just wants to know, is everything working currently? He doesn't necessarily want to know about the history of it. Now, when we work with a bigger, either one, a bigger building, or two, not corporate necessarily, but a bigger group of buyers, they're going to want to know the history, and they're also going to want to know what money they're going to have it coming out of their pocket in the future. So they're going to spend a little bit more for the more in-depth inspection report on that type of stuff.
Correct.
Inspection-wise, doesn't take much longer than a residential, in the sense of it just takes a while to get on their book. It takes about a week for them to get out there, but really they turn it around pretty quick. Survey-wise, we see typically somewhere in the range between 10 to 15 business days for them to complete a survey. The survey is important because not only does it go to the lender, but it also will go to our attorney, who's going to review the survey with the title report that we get from our title company. So we've got that on there. So those two are big. Another one that we have go through there is an environmental or a phase one. This will give you, if I could spell that right, thank you, autocorrect. This will give you an idea of if there's any history with not only the property that you're buying, but any property around it. Maybe there was a fuel tank stored underneath, or some sort of super site, or you know, something that's nearby that could be causing some sort of water damage, could be you know, causing any sort of issue going on with the building. This is big. The lender is the one that drives this one. But it's big to understand, I'm not buying a piece of property that is, I can't resell basically because there's other issues going on.
Phase one is basically a historical, and it talks about, you know, the property, etc. At the end of the report, no sampling is taken. It's basically a historical, as Brett was saying. Were there tanks? Maybe the drywall was installed in 1951. So at the end of the proposal, there's the environmental engineer will say no further action required. That's what you want. If they say further action required, then you got to get into a phase two. And the phase two is really about the testing. So if there are tanks, you know, you have to get you may have to get soil samples, borings. If if there's a belief of asbestos because of the age, you'll have to get some testing done. And that can run up to 30 grand. So we really, really don't want to see a phase 2 ever in any of our reports. So,
So environmental, last one, and there's other things that certain companies will do, certain buyers will do, but this is kind of the basic, at least minimum stuff that we have to get done, is the appraisal. And that's, again, along with the phase 1, that's through the lender. Same thing as residential, very important. You know, they're lending up to a certain amount. They want to make sure that it appraises for that amount. A big part, like I had mentioned, is you've got the SBA, like we're working with the SBA loan. Not only does it have to appraise for the amount of the building, but then if the buyer wants to do any sort of upgrades or any sort of improvements to the building and put it inside of the lender, we then also have to have contractors go through. So on this particular deal we're doing, he also has an AC contractor going through. And he wants to add 2 new AC units to the roof. So we have to get that all done during it. So it's not necessarily a one call to have the inspector go out. It's setting up all these different ones.
let's talk about timing on this. The timing, typically in our deals, we'll do a 45. It doesn't happen this way. Most sellers want, right now, because the market's tight, they want a 30-day due diligence, which these inspections can take to get them signed up, to get them out there. It may be 1 to 2 weeks. That's 14 days. If we go to that more exhaustive one, that's about 2 weeks as well. Survey is going to take close to 2 weeks as well. The phase 1 is going to, again, we have to make sure about timing. It's going to take up to 2 weeks as well, 10 to 15 days. So, so we're trying to get that all done within that 45-day period. So right now, we lost this deal. We just lost was because it's the holidays. Someone else could perform a little quicker than we could. We just can't get people out there, and the buyer didn't feel comfortable as well. The other thing is, besides the timing, what do we get to select? We get to select the inspection, the survey, the phase 1 and the appraisal. If we have a lender, typically they would like to have a say in who we use for a phase 1 or who they use for an appraisal. We don't get to select that. We may have a hand in selecting the phase 1. We may have, and usually we do, have a say in the survey, but the inspection, that's for us.
Yeah. The last part that goes into all this is there is an attorney. Then we have an attorney involved who, there's not enough T's in there, who's going to review the survey. They can review the phase 1, but the survey they're going to review along with the title. On the lower end, $1,500 to have them basically just review, not make any marks, not do a whole lot of else, just review and make sure that everything looks fine. Obviously, it can go even higher than that. Even just on reviewing a lease, the Fashion Square lease that we had them review, that was $4,500 for them to review a lease to go.
And the reason why that is, it's in Scottsdale Fashion Square. Typical lease might be anywhere from 10 to 20 pages. That Fashion Square lease was close to 100 pages. Yeah. So it's going to take a lot more time to be in that space.
And understand too, they want 30 days for due diligence. This is calendar days. But then when we start doing the due diligence, these guys are on business days. And so we've got to, make sure that these are mixed in correctly on there. Obviously, holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's coming up is that 30 days goes really quick when we're talking about business days down here. So just an idea of what goes into the due diligence on a purchase side of it. It's not just ordering inspection, but we also have to make sure that we have a whole lot of other things. Along with the team too, You know, and these, obviously these are all different companies. Along with the team is we have the lender involved and knowledgeable on every move that we make, so that we're working as a cohesive team, because we want to make sure that they're on the appraisal. We want to make sure that they're on the phase one, and we want to make sure that the bank and the loan are going correctly. Because we're just as dependent on all of our stuff as we are on them doing all of their stuff in a timely manner in order to hit our 30 days due diligence. Because once that 30 days is up, then most of the time we have between 15 to 30 days to close. But just like the 10-day inspection period in residential is, we sign off after that 30 days and we can't do anything after the close. We just move forward after that. So the due diligence is really where we got to make sure we do everything, and this is our point where we can back out. Understand, if we find anything at any of these levels, we're still having, the buyer needs to understand that they're still coming out of pocket quite a bit of money for all of these things, even if we don't go through with the sale and they back out for any reason. So they may get their deposit or their earnest money back, but they're still into it with a little bit of cash just to go through a lot of these due diligence items. And that's stuff that we need to make sure that we educate our buyers on.
We also like to know, we also like to tell the other broker that we've done this stuff because, and keep that relationship, because if they don't go through with the deal, they can always sell these reports back to the current seller if we're representing the buyer. So the other thing is, on top of this, for example, we're bringing up this Scottsdale Fashion Square deal with Ducati. Brett was acting as a construction manager as well. So when we get involved in deals and there are smaller groups that don't have a real estate component or have a facilities person, some of the other groups that we do have that. But if they don't, this one, Brett, I think we negotiated $3 to $5 grand, something like that, to just watch over the construction, make sure that they felt comfortable with how the build-up was going, and Brett was there watching over it every few days, with definitely lots of emails on that. So, any questions? No? Okay.
So guys, if you have any questions, jump in right away, because that way you can at least get it taken care of now compared to wondering about it, 20, 30 minutes.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, now if you have an owner of a building and you have several tenants, and that the one that wrote the leases and did all the leases with the tenants goes into default, then the new owner, do they have to redo the leases at that point? Even though they have a lease with the old owner, but the old owner gets wiped out, then do the tenants have to renew with the new owner, or is their lease good?
Well, we have something called estoppel certificates that we utilize, so that once it gets into, they can, how's it right? We have. It's a good question. When we get into the bankruptcy situation, these leases provide, within the leases, they provide for what happens if a landlord goes BK. The lease is still affirmed by the courts, I believe, but in terms of a seller default, they'll have the tenants, I believe, sign estoppel certificates to affirm the leases. So I think everything is fine at that point. Yes. A good question.
All right, guys, any more questions?
I think the other part too that we're finding, just real quick, and then we can end this thing. The other part too that we're finding is, and I think we talked about it last time, and we talked about it quite a bit. Greg's heard us say it a lot. Commercial moves much slower. We work on the weekends in the sense of we send emails, we might make some phone calls, but really we're not doing showings. We work more inside of business hours because a lot of the people that we're working with are working inside of business hours. And so understanding that when a lead comes or something happens, we get excited and we want to make sure that we jump on it and do it right away. There's kind of a fine line between understanding the residential side where it's like, unfortunately, when you guys go show a house pops up and you've got a buyer, you've got to get there within an hour, it feels like. I mean, you got to get there yesterday. It's crazy how quick that is. For us, we want to make sure that we sit down and have we love doing face-to-face meetings, but if it's a phone call, we want to do meetings firsthand. We want to get to know the buyer or the seller, whoever it is. We want to get to know the tenant, understand the business, and make sure that they're lined up first to move. And that usually takes a little bit of time, and we move a little bit slower. It's not that we're moving slow, just compared to residential versus commercial, it seems like things are moving much slower. We bring up the Fashion Square one just because it's a bright point in the sense of how we want it to work. We had an inside agent bring us a deal. We were successful in the deal, and now they're back with them. They're back with the agent that sent it. They're back with them doing a $1 million plus home sale, which is exactly how we want it to work. So we bring that up a lot. But just so you know, we started negotiation in February, and they just opened for business last week. So it takes a long time to get going through stuff, and all that type of stuff. So we move, it's quick for commercial, but it's compared to residential much slower, and it's always something that we kind of try to talk about. I did see.
Yeah, there's a chat that just popped up. How do you buy commercial land?
Maybe in terms of, I guess, if you're, well, before I would make an offer, or is it about the property already built? The commercial land is interesting, I think, just like anything. You have to do a little research before you submit a letter of intent. You're going to want to know a little bit about where it's located, what municipality you're in, because each municipality has different zonings. You're going to want to know if you're in a county. You're going to want to know if, just like you're doing in residential, you're going to want to know where the sewer, the water, those items are. We'll have tap-in fees just like anywhere. But again, you have to do that research ahead of time. After that, then a letter of it, once you find out that you like the property, then the letter of intent is based upon the market comps. Again, very similar to residential in that regard. You'll submit a letter of intent on a piece of commercial land. The second part of that question, is it easier to buy a property already built? Again, it depends on what you want it for. Commercial land, if you want to hold on to land, hopefully you have a lot of money if it's just sitting there and you want it to appreciate. Otherwise, if you have a use in mind, that will guide how you buy that commercial property as well. If it's a daycare, if it's an industrial building, if it's a retail property. So you're going to want to know what that is. Is it easier to buy an already built property? Yeah, it actually is, because all of the utilities are there. You can focus on the asset, which is, the building, the roof, those sorts of things. You don't have to worry about all of the other ancillary pieces like utilities, etc. Zoning's already there, so a little easier to buy existing.
I found something too. I mean, if you're talking about, a piece of land, easiest to go out on the west side right now. That's where a lot of there's open vacant land right now. West side's really blowing up with that. Let me see if I can find one real quick to kind of give an understanding of it. So just say this corner right here, Peoria and Cerebral. So, this might not be the case, but just understand, I'm not sharing my screen. Let me share my screen real quick. Right there. So there we go. Everybody see that? So we've got this corner right here, and it might not be this case, but just for an example, nothing on this corner is built. So if you buy, say you bought this property right here on the northeast corner of Peoria and Centerville, and you want to put a commercial there, the figuring out who's, if this is city street, if it's county street, if it's in Maricopa County, on which of that type of stuff. But then understanding if you're the first one to build here, you might also be required to have egress, where they go in, where they come out. You might be required to actually widen this road at a turn lane, a designated turn lane in and out. You also might be, because you're the first person on this corner, you might actually have to add in a street light right here. And so understanding as you purchase this land, it's not just purchasing this land, but there's also a lot of other stuff that the city is going to basically make you do improvements. If you're the first one, now if it's county versus city, you might just have to buy into that. You're one of 4 buying into that. But understanding, hey, I'm not just buying this land, I also need to know, like he's saying, where are the utilities located? Are they run here already? Where does my ingress egress have to be? Where do I need to add a designated turn lane? Do I need to add light? Those are big due diligence items that go into it. And the due diligence on a piece of land, we're no longer looking at 30 or 45 days. We might be looking at 6 months, because we've got to go into the city and change the zoning on that. Now, the second part of that question, and not to necessarily overtake it, second part of that question is if you buy a piece that's already built or is already zoned and has everything there, then you're just buying that. You don't have to go through all that process and figure out all that stuff. So you might pay a little bit more for the piece of property, but it's already got a lot of that stuff in there. So just to kind of give you a heads up on land, commercial land, it can get pricey on that type of stuff. So.
Yes.
Okay, guys. Do you guys have anything else, or?
One question, Lisa, you're thinking about Buckeye. The problem with Buckeye is that, and we have something that we're working on out there. The problem with Buckeye is that the infrastructure is not there. Water and sewer in this community is going to grow like gangbusters. They're losing people within the city, village. They have enough reserves to hire people. However, they're not doing it. And with that said, there's not the process gets delayed for rezoning, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the problem with Buckeye and some of the markets out west is that Buckeye doesn't have their own. When you're in Buckeye, you're going to have to deal with private utility companies. So there's a group out there called EPCOR, and then there's another one out there. They're Canadian companies, actually, and they control the water and the sewer. You might be in Glendale or another community, and there might be a tap-in fee. If you're in Buckeye and you're dealing with a private water company, you might have to do it based upon. I'm very familiar with. Okay, gotcha. Super high rates. Yeah. So you get and what they'll do is they'll do it based upon usage. So you just don't know, and it can be very expensive. So that's what you wanted to know, Lisa. Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Anything else? Otherwise, I think that's kind of all we've got today.
Scott, you're on mute.
Still on mute.
Oh, there we go.
All right. Hi, Jim. Did you get a chance to talk to Mitch Hornick Monday?
Yeah, we did. We had a nice conversation with him yesterday, and good guy. He's on a mission right now. He owes us a few things. I think we copied you on it, and we haven't received it yet, but we'll be following up with him in the next year.
Okay.
We found a few properties for him.
All right. Any information I could have provided that would have been better for you, or
What?
any information I could have provided that would have been better for you, or is that pretty much the way that it goes in the future?
No, your summary was good, Scott. I think we didn't know that he had a couple properties in mind. He didn't send those to us, but No, it was good. It was a good intro, and I think you listed off what he really needed. And our conversation, we got a little more down into the weeds with him, which really was helpful. So I think within the next week or two, he definitely has to have done something. So we'll keep you posted, of course. Thank you.
All right, thanks for following up.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, well, thank you everybody for joining today. We did have a question about when our next class is. It's going to be January 5th. The same link that you received today will be the one that we have, I think, through the end of 2021. So if anything else needs to change, you'll get updated just like you did yesterday and today. So thank you, everybody. I will be sending out an email shortly after this. And just give us some feedback. Let us know if there's any subjects that you're really looking forward to hearing or you want more information about. That way I can get it to Jim and Brett, and that way they can make sure that they have all the material ready for you. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.